The rain had been falling since morning, thick and heavy, like the weight pressing on my chest. Arman and I rushed through the puddled car park of South Jakarta General Hospital, my hand tucked tightly in his as he held his coat over both our heads. My baby bump made running difficult, but he stayed close, whispering encouragements. "Almost there, sweetheart. Just a quick checkup, then we'll grab that chocolate fudge sundae you've been dreaming about." I laughed softly, breathless, as we stepped inside the lobby. The cold air conditioning mixed with the sterile hospital scent. I hated hospitals. But with Arman by my side, it didn't feel so bad. He gave me that comforting strength, the kind you believe will never fade. We sat in the waiting area. I leaned against his shoulder while he scrolled through his phone, one hand resting gently on my belly. It was moments like these when I imagined the future. Our baby's first smile. Lazy Sunday mornings. Growing old together. All the promises he had made danced softly in my mind like a lullaby. That was until his phone lit up. I saw the name on the screen before he turned it away. Cinta. He didn't answer right away. Just stared for a moment too long. His thumb hovered. Then, a vibration followed, another message. His jaw tightened. His entire body stiffened. I looked up. "Is everything all right?" He stood, avoiding my gaze. "It's Cinta, she's feeling low. It's her birthday today." I blinked. "Okay. But, we're here. I'm about to go in." He sighed, glancing toward the hallway. "She's alone. I promised her a long time ago I'd always show up for her birthday, no matter what." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm not just your girlfriend anymore. I'm the mother of your child." He ran a hand through his hair. "I know. I won't be long. I swear. You'll be fine. You always said the past was behind you." "It is." "Then why are you running to her on her birthday, not mine?" There was silence between us. A silence that screamed louder than any fight ever could. Finally, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. "I love you, Nadia. Please don't make this harder than it is." And with that, he walked away. I watched him go, his back to me, his steps unhurried. No glance back. Just gone. I sat there, my palms pressed against my belly, feeling our child stir. A small kick, almost like a reminder that I wasn't alone. My throat burned, but I held back the tears. The nurse called my name. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. I got up. Walked down that white, cold corridor. Alone. Inside the examination room, the doctor smiled and asked how I'd been feeling. I nodded, answering her questions. But my mind wasn't there. My heart was spiraling. I kept picturing Arman, sitting beside someone else, celebrating, laughing, while I lay on this sterile table hearing my baby's heartbeat echo in a lonely room. And that was the moment. The exact second when something inside me shifted. Not sadness. Not even anger. Clarity. This wasn't the kind of love I wanted my child to grow up watching. That was the moment I made my decision. The next morning, the Jakarta sun was cruel. Bright, hot, unforgiving, almost mocking. I stood by the kitchen sink, pouring warm water over my swollen feet, staring blankly out the window. The flowers Arman brought home 3 days ago were already wilting in the vase. A perfect metaphor. He came home late the previous night, reeking of cheap perfume and guilt. He didn't speak much. Didn't need to. His silence screamed louder than any apology ever could. "Nadia," he murmured as he reached for my hand. But I stepped away. "You missed the ultrasound." He sighed, like the weight of my disappointment was too heavy for his fragile pride. "I know. I'm sorry. It just It was a tough day for her. I blinked. For her? The audacity left me breathless. You don't even hear yourself anymore, do you? I do, he said softly. And I know I'm failing. But I don't want to lose us. I just need time to figure things out. I stared at him, really stared. This man I once believed in. The one I pictured growing old with. Now, all I saw was someone who wasn't brave enough to let go of his past, nor strong enough to stand firmly in our future. You've already lost us, Arman. You just don't know it yet. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. That was the most heartbreaking part. Later that day, I packed a small suitcase. Not all of my things. Just enough to last me a while. A few clothes, my ultrasound pictures, my journal. I didn't want to make a scene. No screaming, no accusations. Just quiet decisions. I left a note on the coffee table. Don't look for me. This isn't goodbye forever. Just a goodbye for now, until I remember how to breathe again. Then I walked out. Past the door he once carried me through. Down the stairs he painted himself. Across the road he promised to teach our child how to cross safely. With every step, the air got lighter. I checked into a modest guest house near Kamang. Small room, single bed, curtains that smelled of mothballs. But it was mine. My space. My choice. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly, whispering to my baby. I'm sorry I didn't leave sooner. But I promise, from now on, we walk forward. Not backward. 2 days later, Vera arrived. My childhood best friend. The kind who'd once fought off a gang of bullies for stealing my crayons in primary school. She burst into the room like a storm, eyes wide, arms outstretched. I swear to God, Nadia, if you ever disappear on me again, I will drag you back by the ankles. I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. She sat beside me, scanned my face, then the small room, and finally said, "You're braver than you think, you know." I smiled. I don't feel brave. Just done. Vera leaned back. That's where it begins. When you're finally done pretending. We talked late into the night. I told her everything. The little betrayals, the half-lies, the forced smiles. The hope that kept shrinking, day by day. You gave him chances he didn't earn, she said. And now, you're giving yourself the one thing he never could, peace. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew she was right. And yet, a part of me still clung to that memory of Arman holding my hand at the hospital, whispering that he couldn't wait to meet our baby. That memory haunted me. Because love doesn't die all at once. Sometimes, it fades in slow motion. But even then, something new begins to grow in its place. Something stronger. Weeks passed. Quietly. Softly. Like the sound of distant rain falling on rooftops in the early morning. Life in Kamang moved at a slower rhythm. The honking horns and chaos of the city still echoed beyond the windows, but inside my small guest house room, I found stillness. I had started working remotely again, light admin jobs for a small design firm, just enough to pay the bills and keep my mind busy. Vera visited every weekend, bringing food, gossip, and warmth. She never pushed me to talk about Arman. She just stayed. One evening, as I sat journaling by the window, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I hadn't saved but still recognized instantly. I saw your car at the workshop. Are you okay? It was Cinta. My breath caught in my throat. That name. That woman. That shadow in my story. I stared at the screen for a long time, torn between anger, curiosity, and a strange pull I couldn't quite explain. I didn't reply. But that night, I couldn't sleep. A few days later, Vera and I were having kopi chubruk at a warung not far from the guest house. The air was thick with the scent of cloves and burnt sugar. "So, she messaged you," Vera said without looking up from her cup. I nodded. I didn't reply. "Good. Is it, though?" I whispered. Vera looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes softened. "You're allowed to want closure, Nadia. Even if it comes from the unlikeliest place." That sentence sat with me the rest of the day. The next morning, I sent a reply. "I'm fine. Please don't contact me again." 2 ticks. No reply. Good. But 2 days later, as I stepped out to grab some groceries, I saw her. Across the street. Standing beside a motorbike, helmet in hand. Cinta. She didn't move. Didn't wave. Just stood there. Watching. Our eyes met. And for a split second, the world froze. She looked tired. Older. Sad, even. I turned and walked away. That night, I dreamt of the hospital again. But this time, I wasn't the one waiting alone. Cinta was there, too. Crying. Holding a single balloon with, "It's a boy," printed on it. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. This had to end. The next afternoon, I messaged her again. "Why did you come?" This time, she replied almost instantly. "Because I'm sorry. And because I'm not who you think I am." I stared at the words. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Then tell me who you are." Her answer came 5 minutes later. "Not here. Can we meet? Somewhere public. Just once. You don't owe me anything. But I owe you the truth." I didn't know why, but I said yes. We met at a cafe near Block M, bright place, lots of glass, lots of people. No shadows to hide in. She arrived first, already seated at the corner. Dressed in soft linen, no makeup, no mask. Just raw. I sat across from her. Neither of us smiled. "You have 10 minutes, I said. She nodded. "Fair." Then she began. "Arman and I, we never really ended. But we were never really anything, either. I was the echo he couldn't silence. And I let him use me, because I didn't think I deserved better." She paused. Sipped her tea. "When he got with you, I thought he'd changed. He promised me he had. Then he started messaging again. Late nights. Guilt texts. You know the kind." I said nothing. I didn't need to. I already knew. But then he told me about the baby. And suddenly, I saw him clearly. A man running from his responsibilities, using pity as a leash. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I wanted to hurt you, Nadia. At first. Because I thought you'd taken something from me. But the truth is, you gave him a chance to be better. And he wasted it." Silence fell. Cinta leaned back. Her voice cracked. "You're stronger than both of us. I see that now. And I'm sorry for every part one played in your pain." I didn't forgive her. Not then. But I nodded. Because sometimes, closure isn't a door slamming shut. Sometimes, it's a whisper. And I finally heard it. After the cafe meeting with Cinta, something inside me shifted. Not in a dramatic, life-altering way. No fireworks, no sweeping sense of liberation. But a quiet turning of a key in a door I hadn't dared to open. I felt it click. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But clarity. And in that clarity, came a whisper of something I hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. I began going through my old notes. The receipts I had stored. The transfers I had made from my personal account to Arman's over the years. The temporary loans, the baby expenses, the lavish dinners I had paid for without realizing they weren't even for me. Everything. It was all there. Logged. Organized. A quiet testament to the years I spent being blind to what was in plain sight. Vera noticed the change. "You're up late again," she said one night, leaning on my doorframe. "I'm planning," I replied, without looking up. She said nothing. Just smiled slightly and walked away. A week later, I requested a meeting with an old friend, Demas, a former finance analyst who now worked as a consultant. Sharp mind, quiet temperament, loyal to a fault. We met at a quiet rooftop cafe in Suderman, away from any familiar eyes. "Demas," I said, sliding the folder across the table, "I need to know if I can do anything with this." He raised an eyebrow, flipping through the documents. "You've been funding his lifestyle for years," he muttered. "And he's registered everything under his name." I nodded. "Except one thing," I added. "The apartment. The down payment came from me. Directly from my account. And I've kept the email where he said it would be in both our names." Demas paused. "That changes things." He leaned in. "I think I can help." The next few weeks were a blur of calculated moves. Demas connected me to a property lawyer. A woman named Clara, sharp as glass, and twice as dangerous. She read through the documents in silence, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. "You're not trying to get revenge," she said. "You're reclaiming what was already yours." And I realized she was right. This wasn't about Arman anymore. Not about Cinta. It was about me. Taking back the parts of myself I had handed over in trust. In love. In silence. I started appearing again. At events. At art galleries. At networking brunches. I wore colors I had abandoned, smiled with a confidence I thought I had lost. Word spread, as it always does in Jakarta. "Nadia's back." People whispered. People watched. And soon enough, so did Arman. He showed up outside Vera's studio one evening, waiting by the car. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't flinch. I didn't avoid his gaze. "We already did," I replied. "You just didn't hear me the first time." He stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" I smiled. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." And I meant it. Because what I wanted, what I needed, was already underway. And he had no idea. That night, I stood on the rooftop of my guest house, staring out over the city skyline. The lights of Jakarta flickered like stars. I took a deep breath and whispered to the night. "You don't get to take from me anymore." The next morning, Arman received an official letter from Clara's firm. A claim. For half the value of the apartment. Accompanied by a polite notice that if he failed to respond, the case would proceed through court, with full exposure of financial records, bank statements, and personal correspondence. Vera grinned when she saw the envelope on his doorstep. "Phase 1, she said. I nodded. The silence that once held me captive was now the armor I wore. And for the first time in years, I was no longer afraid. Jakarta mornings have a rhythm. The hum of motorbikes, the shuffle of street vendors setting up, the chatter of early risers echoing through narrow alleys. But that morning, I heard none of it. Just the sound of my own breath. Steady. Focused. Everything was in motion now. The legal papers had been delivered. Arman was forced to respond. And true to form, he tried to act like nothing had happened. I saw him days later at a mutual friend's gallery opening in Kemang. He wore his usual polished smile. The kind that once charmed me. But now it only reminded me how much I had changed. "Still trying to make a scene," he said under his breath as we passed each other by the bar. I turned, looked him in the eyes, and answered with a calmness that made his smirk falter. You haven't even seen the opening act. Behind closed doors, Arman had been panicking. I knew this because Demas kept me informed. Through his contacts, we learned Arman had started moving money, liquidating minor assets, trying to protect himself. But he was late. Clara had already filed a freeze request on any shared property claims. The apartment was now under legal observation, and he couldn't sell, rent, or transfer anything without clearance. It was a quiet checkmate. Still, I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because the next phase required precision. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about shifting the balance of power entirely. I had to make sure the world saw who he really was. But not with vengeance. With truth. And to do that, I needed evidence only one person could provide. Cinta. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to message her again. We met in a small book cafe in Sapete. I arrived early and waited in a corner booth. When she finally walked in, her face was tense, eyes cautious, lips tight. But she came. And that meant everything. I need your help, I said simply. She sat down, nodded. I know. I explained everything. What I had gathered. What I had done. And why it wasn't enough. I need your testimony, Cinta, I said gently. Not for me. For yourself. For your son. For every woman who's ever been lied to and left behind while he plays the victim. She said nothing for a while. Then slowly, she opened her bag and pulled out her phone. There's something I never deleted, she whispered. It was an audio recording. A conversation between her and Arman, one night after a fight. He had been drunk. Angry. Careless. On the recording, his voice slurred through words that stung like venom. I don't owe her anything. Nadia? She should be grateful I stayed as long as I did. She paid for comfort. That's all. I felt my jaw tighten. But I didn't cry. I just pressed save. The next few days were swift. Demas helped draft a formal complaint to the Housing Commission. Clara prepared to escalate the legal claim with the added recording. And I started preparing the final step. The public unveiling. Not out of spite. But because silence had protected him too long. And now it was time for the silence to speak. One morning, I opened my laptop and began drafting a story. Not fiction. Not drama. Just truth. I titled it, What It Cost Me to Love a Man Who Never Loved Me Back. And as I typed, I let every wound breathe. Not for revenge. But for release. The story went live on a Thursday evening. No ads. No flashy titles. Just a plain background, black text on white. I posted it on my old blog, one I hadn't touched in years, and quietly shared the link in a single, calculated tweet. I was silent. Now I'm not. That was all it said. The reaction was slow at first. A few clicks. A handful of shares. But by midnight, it had snowballed. Hundreds of retweets. Dozens of direct messages. People I didn't know thanking me. Others, sharing their own stories. And then, something I never expected. One by one, other women came forward. They had their own versions of Arman. Some had only dated him briefly. Others had worked with him. And one had lived with him. Each story was different. But the pattern was the same. Gaslighting. Ghosting. Promises that evaporated the moment they were inconvenient. By Friday morning, the story had made its way to a popular lifestyle site. They reached out for a statement. I didn't give one. I didn't need to. By then, someone had identified Arman through subtle details in the story. His business socials were flooded with comments. His polished image now stained with suspicion. And when he tried to post a rebuttal, no one believed him. Because the voice recording Cinta had given me. It had leaked. Someone uploaded it anonymously to a popular podcast channel. It spread like wildfire. His voice, his words, arrogant, cruel, undeniable, played again and again. I don't owe her anything. At the same time, Clara informed me that his legal counsel had reached out. Apparently, Arman wanted to settle. Not just the apartment. Everything. He was tired, she said. Cornered. Angry. Afraid. I imagined him pacing in some expensive office, slamming his phone on a marble desk, cursing the internet, blaming everyone but himself. But that was no longer my concern. What mattered was this: I had survived him. Quietly, then fiercely. Now, I was building something new. Demas and I had talked about it, starting a foundation, maybe, to help women in similar situations. Cinta agreed to help. Clara too. But before any of that could begin, I needed to reclaim the one piece of myself I hadn't yet touched. My peace. So I took a break. I flew to Ubud alone, rented a modest villa with no Wi-Fi, and spent a week waking up to birdsong and sleeping under a ceiling of stars. No news. No calls. Just me, a journal, and the quiet company of my own healing. It was there, in the soft light of dawn, that I finally forgave myself. Not him. Myself. For staying too long. For believing too much. For loving someone who never deserved me. When I returned to Jakarta, I was different. Lighter. I walked past places that used to carry memories and felt nothing. I saw his car once in the distance and didn't flinch. He no longer occupied space in my heart. Only lessons. And when the settlement papers finally arrived, I signed them with steady hands and a steady heart. I had won. But more importantly, I was free. 3 months had passed. I had settled into my new life. The apartment was mine, finally, legally, and entirely. I redecorated it room by room, stripping away every trace of Arman's presence. The white minimalist walls were now adorned with soft earth tones. Books replaced the cold, modern sculptures he used to brag about. Every inch of the space now breathed me. My mornings were quiet. Coffee. A bit of writing. The occasional call with Demas, who was currently back in Yogyakarta setting up the foundation we'd spoken of. We were taking things slowly. No pressure. No promises. Just presence. And then, one rainy afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Cinta. I hadn't seen her since the scandal broke. We'd exchanged a few messages, but she had gone off-grid. Said she needed space. Time to rebuild her career. Time to understand what kind of man she had almost tethered herself to. I opened the door and found her standing there, soaked from the rain, clutching a paper bag in her hands. Thought you might want some of those cheese pastries you love, she said, forcing a small smile. Inside, we sat in silence for a while. The rain tapped gently on the windows. The smell of baked cheese filled the room. I owe you an apology, she said at last, her eyes soft but unwavering. No, you don't, I replied. We were both played. You just got the apology I never did. She looked at me, her lip trembling slightly. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it. How I let him lie to both of us like that. I nodded. Because he was good at it. And because we wanted to believe. We talked for hours. About the past. The wreckage. The strange guilt that lingered even after surviving the storm. And for the first time, I felt no resentment towards her. Only understanding. Cinta eventually laughed, softly, at first, then with her whole chest. You know what the worst part was, she said between chuckles. He bought me a bracelet once. Told me it was custom made in Milan. I found the exact same one in a mall in Benghazi for a quarter of the price. We both burst out laughing. That moment. That ridiculous, cathartic, liberating laughter. It was the turning point. Not just for her. For me too. Because healing doesn't always arrive with a dramatic revelation. Sometimes, it tiptoes in with a pastry bag and a confession at your door. A week later, we started working on something together. A podcast. Stories of women who had loved deeply, lost fiercely, and lived to tell the tale. It wasn't about men like Arman anymore. It was about the ones who survived them. Who rebuilt. Who grew. We called it Her Turn. It spread quickly, just like the blog post had. But this time, there was no anger in it. Just strength. Solidarity. And healing. One evening, as we were recording a new episode, Clara dropped by with a bottle of wine. To the sisterhood, she said, raising her glass. And to not putting up with any more nonsense. We toasted under fairy lights and late-night city hum. We had all come from different stories. Different wounds. But somehow, we'd woven them into something fierce and whole. And just when I thought that chapter of my life had ended, fate had one last surprise for me. The following morning, as I opened my inbox, there it was. An email. From Arman. I stared at the email, my heart racing. It had been so long since I had seen his name. Yet, there it was, bold and undeniable in my inbox. From Arman. Subject, we need to talk. I hesitated. The past 3 months had been my time to heal, to rebuild. I was no longer that woman who had waited for his attention, for his love. But something about seeing his name, so final in the subject line, stirred up a mixture of emotions I hadn't expected. A cocktail of resentment, curiosity, and perhaps even closure. I clicked on the email. Nadia. I know you've probably moved on by now, but I need to explain. There are things I never told you. I owe you an apology. Let's meet. Arman. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. I felt no anger, only disbelief. I had spent months trying to erase him, to turn the page, and now here he was, coming back like a ghost that I thought I had buried. I debated with myself for hours. Part of me wanted to delete the email, to shut him out completely. Another part wondered what he wanted to say. What could he possibly say after everything that had happened? In the end, I made a decision. I would meet him. Not because I still cared. Not because I was waiting for any grand apology. But because I wanted control over this final chapter. I needed to face him, not as a victim, but as a woman who had learned from the chaos he left in his wake. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in the city. It was a place I used to go to with friends when I wanted peace, before Arman's shadow had clouded everything. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He looked different, more tired, perhaps. The sharpness in his features had softened, and the suit that once seemed to define him now appeared too large, as though he no longer fit the man he had been trying to portray. He stood when he saw me, a hesitant smile tugging at his lips. Nadia, he said softly. I didn't expect you to come. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took a seat and waited for him to speak first. I owe you an explanation, he began, his voice cracking slightly. I was selfish. I pushed you aside for someone else. And I was blind to everything you did for me. You were always there, always supportive, and I threw that all away. I felt a coldness creeping over me, but I didn't speak. I let him continue, knowing that this moment, this conversation, was no longer about reconciliation. It was about closure. I was so caught up in my own ego, he continued, that I didn't see how much I hurt you. How much I hurt us. The words were familiar, the kind of apology I had imagined in countless dreams. But hearing them now, they felt hollow. Like a man trying to repair a bridge he had already burned. I finally spoke, my voice steady and calm. I don't need your apology, Arman. I've moved on. What's done is done. He nodded, a sad expression crossing his face. I understand. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't want to waste any more time on him. I had already given him enough years of my life. I stood up, and without looking back, I left the cafe. As I walked down the street, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of the past, his lies, his betrayal, his absence, seemed to lift with each step. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Not him. Not Demas. Not anyone. I had learned to love myself again, to trust my instincts, and to never settle for anything less than what I deserved. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, the familiar silence around me felt comforting. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the woman I had become. I was free. And nothing, not even Arman, could take that from me.